to our last webinar for the 2022-23 school year season here at NILD. And we have some new guests to introduce you to, or some new speakers. I met these ladies at the IDA convention. They were my booth mates. They are fabulous. And they know all things decodable readers. And since we have our new NILD decodable readers coming down the pipe for you, we wanted to invite them here to give us all their wisdom and knowledge about how to use decodable readers in the 5 pillars of reading. So first of all is Jill Lauren and Abby Hanrahan. Jill is the creator of Whole Phonics, and Abby is her assistant. They have both been, I shouldn't say assistant, her co-writer is probably the better term. They have been educators in reading and writing, and are experts, have been in the field for 35 years. They are well versed in all things. Jill, this is what she does full-time now, is Whole Phonics, and Abby is still teaching at her school with students with learning differences up in Greenwich, Connecticut. So I don't want to take up any more time. I want to hand it over to these fabulous ladies. Now, just as everybody knows, if you have questions, we will save some time at the end, about 10 minutes or so, for questions. But if you have any, you can type them into the chat, and I will be either referring to them in the middle of the session or waiting to the end. So take it away, ladies. It's great to hear from you.
Hi there. I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll introduce Abby. I'm Jill Lauren, and I do want to say that I'm still teaching, even if it's an hour, 2 to 3 days a week. I basically can't stop. I just love it so much, and I'm working with the little guys. So it's just been a passion my entire life. And out of my teaching came this desire to create this Whole Phonics product. But we're here today more to talk to you about how do we look at and use decodable text. And as Wendy mentioned, a lot of what I created, Abby helped me with. We both come from this philosophy that our theory informs our practice. So while we're not researchers, we're well versed in the theory. We'll be touching upon some of it as we speak today, but we're really going to dig into what does practice look like. And Abby, who's been an incredible right-hand woman to me as I've created this program, why don't you say a couple words about your teaching experience?
So hello, everybody. I'm really honored to be here today with Jill. Thank you, Wendy, for reaching out to us. I am a teacher full-time at the Eagle Hill School in Greenwich, Connecticut, a school that was developed in 1975 for children with language-based learning disabilities. I've been a classroom teacher, a part-time administrator here, but mostly in the classroom for the past 36 years. And along the way, I've focused in the last 25 years teaching children how to read. I work in the lower school, so I'm working with not quite as young as Jill, but primarily over the last 10 years, I've worked with 2nd through 5th graders who are well below their grade level in reading.
So we're going to get started, and we do want to just acknowledge the key components of the NILD philosophy, being cognition, perception, academics, and emotions, and we'll touch upon them as we go through. Okay, so basically, I'm quite sure that given your training, what I'm about to share, you are all well versed in, but it's going to frame our discussion. So it's always worth repeating about what we know about how the brain learns to read. And one of our favorite researchers is Stanislas Dehaene, and he's a French researcher. So if you find videos, his videos, I mean, he's also delightful to listen to, but he talks about the brain's letterbox. And while we all know that reading is a man-made convention, unlike, speaking, we know that the brain is in fact able to read because we can, and that there's parts of the brain that when the brain learns sounds and connects it to our written code, that information is stored in what Professor Dehaene calls the letterbox. And that letterbox then is connected to this concept of the alphabetic principle. which is that there's an understanding that there's a systematic and predictable relationship between written letters and spoken sounds. So when we talk about systematic, and we're going to connect it to decodable text, which is the research of what we know about how we learn to read, then connected right to, well, then how do we learn to read based on that research? And we'll talk to you a little bit about the design of decodable text that's connected to this knowledge. When we say systematic, we mean that we're going to teach phonics systematically, according to a scope and sequence, and that there is a predictable relationship between letters and sounds. And we found that the rules of our spoken language, English, those rules are 85% predictable when it comes to the various words that children are seeing. So that's a pretty high percentage. Like, I would go to Las Vegas every day with those odds. So that's why we teach phonics, because there's a lot of power behind it in terms of children being able to apply that knowledge to text as they learn how to read. So how can kids learn the alphabetic principle? Yes, phonics instruction helps children learn the relationship between the letters of written language and the sounds of spoken language. So in this video, in this webinar, we're going to talk to you about books from 3 different publishers. We'll look at whole phonics. We're going to look at the PAF series, and we're also going to look at a book from the Phonic book series, which is out of England, which is widely available here in the United States. I wanted to also talk, give a shout out to Flyleaf and some of the Hegarty books. And you'll see that we've listed these books mostly because based on our understanding of what kids like, the perception of something that looks fun. I've actually saved that book that says, "Is It So?" That's out of print. And I literally saved it from a fire in the public school I was working at in Connecticut, because these decodable texts, have been an important part of my teaching philosophy since the early 1980s. And I've been seeking out and slowly finding things that are like colorful and visually exciting. So I think that's part of what's important when we start thinking about decodable text, because certainly that, looking at a book that's appealing leads to an emotional response. That's, again, one of the key components of NILD. And we concur completely that when children see books, they should make them happy. So let's talk about what does a highly structured decodable text look like, and what we want to see, because we do want to make sure that we have multiple options for decodable text in our classroom, just as we would have a library of I can read books. So, but when we're looking at the text, we want to make sure that there is what we call a code to text match, and that we have previously taught that code to our students. So certainly we don't want to put a book in front of them that they haven't been taught the phonics skills for, because that's an exercise in frustration. So in the first book of level 1 of whole phonics, you could see here are the sounds to know listed, the short A, and then these consonant sounds. And then there's 5 sight words that have been previously taught, like no and on and is. And by sight words, I'm saying high frequency words that basically we haven't taught them the code for, so they will have to have learned them through memorizing those words. But everything else can be sounded out. There's no surprises. That's what we mean by a really strong code to text match. So that's in the beginning, book 1, and then Abby will show you another book.
So this is an example from a different series. I have used whole phonics. I've used so many different materials over the years. This is a series that I came upon more recently, and I decided to try it out with my students who are older, but who still are in need of that very explicit decoding instruction that Jill was just explaining. so that everything that they see, they've already been explicitly instructed. So again, there are no surprises in the text. The text is a little bit denser, so you'll see if I can hold this up. This is a page. There aren't a whole lot of illustrations, so the focus is really on using those decoding skills. This is an example of an excerpt from Camp Hilltop. It's also a chapter book, which feels more mature. It feels older for those children who emotionally, their emotional state is really connected to their skills and how they're progressing in their reading skills. And so you'll see in the box on the left, it tells all the sounds that have already been instructed, what the emphasis is on suffixes, and also the syllabication pattern. In this very short excerpt, you can see all the examples of when that syllabication pattern of V, C, C, V would be applied. So they're teaching a strategy, and then the children have the opportunity to apply it in the text.
So word of caution, now that phonics is the rage, I mean, a story about the education revolution hit the front page in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, above the fold. So, I mean, you don't get any more newsworthy than that. So we see, reports through many different news organizations, and a lot of companies are writing decodable readers on their books. And let's just, be cautious that if you look at this book, for example, they're saying that they're teaching the short A sound, but there's so many other sounds that are needed to be able to read this book. Like short A usually comes first, but look at all the other sounds that are needed to be able to read this page, including silent E, blends, beginning blends, and you can see the ending, the place value of Y. So it's just a word of caution about not just purchasing something because it says decodable on it, but looking carefully to make sure that the words match a scope and sequence, and they're carefully chosen. So quick mention, we've got to look back and think about, okay, well, what about something as simple as Dick and Jane? Just to, as you look through this, you see the code to text match requires so much information. So there's actually 4 high frequency words on this one simple page. There's the need to know magic E, TH, and R control, and all 5 short vowel sounds. So while this may look simple, and the goal of the look-see method was more memorization, we know that that's not how children learn how to read, and there's a lot of phonics knowledge required just for this one page. And just to, this is actually a really wonderful piece, the Castles and Nation article that's listed in our resources. And evidence suggests that phonics teaching is more effective when children are given immediate opportunities to apply what they have learned in their reading. And I think about this all the time, like, and it kind of just makes sense. Like if you're sitting in math class and you're taught, an algorithm, well, you have to practice it to own it. So if you're shown like, well, here's this new sound, and yeah, that can make sense. Kids can hear the lesson and they'll recognize what you're saying. Yes, yes. But what we're hoping for, not even just hoping, but what our goal is as teachers is that they have to apply that knowledge. So it's this concept of recognition, that's when you could say which sound says eh, but we need them to recall it. So that's basically what this wonderful quote is referring to. And Abby's going to talk to you about this report that we all know, we've all heard a lot about.
So the National Reading Panel, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, spent years really looking at all the studies that have been done about reading. There have been thousands, literally thousands and thousands of studies that have been done about how children learn to read, what are the best methods. And from this pool, they narrowed it down, and then they came up with, I think, this visual sums it up. It's so clear, it's so simple, but yet it really lets us know that there are 5 areas in the area of literacy instruction that really encompass what we need for students to become good readers. Phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. And today in our presentation, we're actually going to go through each pillar and show you how decodable text can be used to tackle each one of these significant areas. Another visual that's really been helpful for us to explain this, I've actually used this visual with parent seminars, trying to explain to parents what goes into learning how to read. It's not really just learning the phonics, but there are so many other areas. And I think this correlates really nicely to those 5 pillars. Because when you think about Scarborough's reading rope, if we were all in a room, I'd say, how many of you have seen this before? And you would raise your hands. When we look at Scarborough's reading rope, really at the top, the word recognition part is really talking about the phonemic awareness pillar, the phonics pillar. And at the bottom, where it's talking about vocabulary and language structures and verbal reasoning and literacy knowledge and the language comprehension, that's where we're kind of talking about the comprehension pillar, the vocabulary pillar, and then we've got that fluency pillar, which kind of helps bring all this together. So all of those skills come together in order to become a skilled reader. And I think it really is a wonderful way of showing just how much goes into reading instruction. And for these children, who many of them are not learning to read by osmosis, it's really taking a lot of work through a very structured approach.
Yes, and shout out to Learning A to Z for this really colorful graphic.
Great one. It's really a great one.
So let's start with phonemic awareness. Now, probably many of you have been following some theoretical butting of the heads with regards to how much phonemic awareness drilling do students need in order to learn how to read. So there's been some controversy. We're just going to talk about some of the research that we've been paying attention to, and we're going to share what we've done as teachers, because some of the phonemic awareness activities are very complex, and Abby and I have not done complex phonemic awareness work, and we haven't seen the need to, and we've every single child I've ever taught has learned how to read, and Abby, same thing for Abby. So we know that what we've been doing has been just right. And we're not saying that anything that's being done is right or wrong. We're just going to share with you what we've done. So, and I agree, this quote by Motes, I think, is super important. Of all the phonological skills, the ability to identify, manipulate, and remember strings of sounds together accounts for a significant portion of the difference between good and poor readers. So, our good readers can do this. And yes, phonological awareness continues to develop in typical readers beyond first grade. And that's part of how Kilpatrick came up with his studies, looking at what good readers can do. And then every point in a child's development of word level reading is substantially affected by phonological awareness, from learning letter names all the way to efficiently adding new multisyllabic sight words. And just understanding, the difference between a letter and a syllable is, impacts a child's ability to learn how to read. Now, this is a page that we use with one of our books called A Pig in His Wig. And what you'll see here, and this is, again, this is the phonemic awareness pillar. What you'll see here is we focus on isolation, blending, and segmenting. And there's 3 days of this. Now, at this point, when I'm teaching, I'll just pull a couple words. I'll never do all 8. I'll just pull a couple words, and I'll do the blending before we read. So I don't do it like all 3 of these together, like before I start the lesson. I'll do the blending before we read, and then I'll do the segmenting before dictation. So I see phonemic awareness drills as very carefully tied to the actual task of reading and writing, so that kids can see why they're doing those skills, that they learn that blending is what they have to do when they're tapping and sliding the words on the page. Now, at this moment, I just want to quickly say, this concept of isolation, blending, and segmenting, you don't even need to buy a book for it. You can literally take any decodable text you have and just pick some words to do your blending with. This is back to one of my old favorites. You know, you could just pull some words for blending, pull some words for segmenting when you're going to do dictation, because we strongly recommend that whatever you're reading then gets flipped for what you're doing with dictation. Like, whatever is in the decodable text should be the words that are being used for dictation. So that means everything's super cohesive and very purposeful in terms of why you're doing what you're doing and what you're choosing for your instructional implementation. Yep, and Abby.
So this is just an example of those same skills that Jill was just talking about at a little bit higher levels. So when I'm using this series, I saw in the Q&A, somebody wanted to know where this was from. This is from, it's Preventing Academic Failure. And I think we have this in the resources at the end, Preventing Academic Failures, the program. But I've taken, to Jill's point, words, I take words from the text. So this story is about going to camp. There's a whole chapter about a mascot. So I'm using that word to teach blending. I find that a lot of my students, apparently, specifically this year, I have 2 students in particular who also have a working memory deficit. So teaching them to blend in chunks as a phonemic awareness task with no letters in front of them is really important and a wonderful way to warm up to the reading. It also, as Jill was saying, impacts their spelling. So if they are blending or they're segmenting, for example, on the next section, if the children are trying to spell, as Jill was saying, with the encoding, we have the word hilltop, now say hill without the top, so that they're able to really use syllabication strategy, not just for reading, but also for spelling. So again, as Jill was saying, they're all connected. This is just at the syllable level, because this is kind of moving past them that individual phoneme level. And it all comes down to, when Jill was speaking before, how much phonemic awareness do your children need? That all comes back to, what does each child need, right? We're not going to use one particular material or program for every student. We really look at the children as individuals and what their needs are.
So now we're on to phonics. And one teaching concept is, if you're going to teach something new, you relate it to what they already know. So if we're about to teach the short I, which, you know, we're actually, that's this little book called A Pig and His Wig, which is downloadable for free through our website. If you haven't already had a chance to download that. So that book, that's the first time we're learning the short I sound. So in order to teach it, in addition to just directly teaching, this is short I, and actually, since I'm in my little office, I use Mr. Itchy, and this is from Itchy's alphabet, and, you know, give a little itch. That helps him remember that itch sound. Anyway, so I go back to, let's look at this word wag, which they can read now, and I tell them, hey, watch this. This is really cool. We're going to switch. Now we're going to switch out your vowel sound, as they've been anchored to short A for a while. And look what happens when we put a new vowel in. Now we have a new word, wig. And of course, they're going to have to go wig, sound that out. Same thing on to the next word. Bag becomes big, and then fat becomes fit. Just ample practice with the new sound, anchoring it to the old. And this magic chain activity, a great activity, both for actual spelling, for dictation, starting with wag, change one letter. make it say wig. Then they have to read the word. What's it say? Wig. Change one letter, make it say big. They change it. What's it say? And so on and so on. So that's a very powerful phonics-based activity that also is, it's useful both for decoding and encoding. And then the multisensory activities that you can connect to your phonics work, whether it's skywriting, we usually recommend 2 fingers to distinguish from one finger when you might be writing in a sand tray. And then the whiteboard, you can use a whiteboard for magic chain, and then the sand tray as well. And then there's teaching phonics with our multisyllabic words, and Abby, you've got that.
So the same type of techniques you would use for 1-syllable words, you can use for 2-syllable words. So in this program, just a couple of months ago, I was teaching the strategy, because we're not just teaching the kids to read the words, we're teaching them the strategies so they can apply them when they come to words they don't know, right? That's the whole purpose. So I like to call these lightning bolt words. Jill and I had a long discussion about different techniques for teaching syllabification strategies. Some techniques would mark these vowels. They would put a V above it or V under it, CC for the consonants, and a V below it. I found with my students, it's kind of visual overload. And just to underline the vowels and divide between those double consonants has been easier. I call them lightning bolt words, just another way to kind of jazz it up. At these laminated lightning bolts when we do them on the table. And then on the active board, I have a lightning bolt that I can move around. These are words, again, that they are going to encounter when they're reading their book. So they're getting that ample practice and isolation before having to apply these skills in the connected text. Once they've learned the strategy, yep, you can, perfect. And we've practiced the strategy kind of through that. I'm sure everyone uses that, the I'm going to do it, we're going to do it, now you do it. So where you're pulling back the support. Once we practiced it using a variety of words, and this is also from that Preventing Academic Failure program, you know, they give a lot of word lists to practice, then we can do other activities just to kind of jazz it up, make it a lot of fun. Here's a way to also incorporate that vocabulary pillar. I'll often have the children, for example, with this, label the 3 columns, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll say, I spy with my big brown eye something in column 1 that is an animal. And they're scanning the column to find the animals, kitten, rabbit. And so we're able to also incorporate some vocabulary development, even talking about categories, what animals, which words go in the category of animals. It's a wonderful way to kind of hit, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak, the decoding practice while also building in some vocabulary. And also timed readings. Part of fluency is not reading fast, but it's reading automatically. So seeing that word rabbit, not sounding it out, but being able to see it. I like to say, see it, say it. So rabbit, picnic, rocket. And the more automatically they read and recognize those words in isolation, the greater impact it will have on fluency when, again, they get to the chapter and are reading the connected text. So timed readings are really helpful. You can play beat the clock games, beat the teacher, working in a round robin as a team. There are a variety of ways. We have many, many ways that we could show with you, but we want to make sure we get through all the information today.
And on to vocabulary now.
On to vocabulary, yes. I brought the book. So this is an incredible resource called Bringing Words to Life. If you haven't seen it, we highly recommend it. There's a lot of great, important research behind why vocabulary is so important to be one of these important pillars in literacy, and the most effective ways to teach vocabulary. In the book, one of the quotes that I love the most is, the most effective vocabulary techniques, instructional techniques, include multiple encounters in varied contexts. We can see, let me just back up for a minute. We can see from these 2 bullet points here how important vocabulary instruction is. And especially for the children that you all deal with and the children that we deal with, where they have a language-based learning disability or learning difference, vocabulary impacts everything. If they don't know the word, it's hard, or they've never heard the word, it's hard to decode it. So it not only impacts their comprehension, it does impact decoding. So it's really important that we spend a lot of time explicitly teaching vocabulary as it's connected to what they're reading. Vocabulary in isolation is not as effective if it's not connected to what they're reading. And multiple practice opportunities so that they can actually own those words. We have a few examples to come up.
Yeah, and I do find that first point about first grade vocabulary predicted students' reading achievement in their junior year in high school remarkable. Just talks to the importance of building a rich vocabulary, like right from the start. So now this is back to A Pig in His Wig. And what we're highlighting here is that there are words that are identified as special vocabulary words that need to be taught before reading, because we think about the word fit, like, does this fit? That's the most common use of it. But in this book, the little pig has a fit. So just to explain that meaning in a child-friendly way. And again, the word hit, like, hit the ball. Of course, I know hit somebody, that's their little kids, that's a common use. But in this case, we're using the word as like, it's a hit, like it's fabulous. So that multiple meaning, which both of these words are multiple meaning words, needs to be taught explicitly. So we are teaching, yes, when something's a hit, we love it. And so we're going to make it meaningful. We're going to explain to them, let's think of something that you love, like, a lot of kids love Frozen. So, we explain, like, that's something that made you feel good. It's a hit. Or if, a sports team wins the World Series, a baseball team, that's a hit. And this picture actually mirrors what's happening in the book. So we're making it as concrete and as meaningful as possible. And I actually, back to this book that Abby's referring to by Isabel Beck and McCune and Kukan, this concept of positive and negative when you're teaching vocabulary. Like, is it a hit if you get a flat tire? No, why not? Because hit means that something's good. So if you understand why something doesn't reflect the meaning of hit, then it's more likely that you really know what that word means. And just of course, a reminder, we want to make sure that children use the word in a sentence. That's when we know kids own the word, and that definitions oftentimes, especially with our language learning disabled kids, need to be scaffolded. Like, I love blank, what movie, what show, it's a hit.
So speaking to that scaffolding of definitions, we've created kind of a formula to help children learn new vocabulary. So in this top one, it's about a noun. So it's a person, place, or thing. A kid is an animal. We put it into the category and then give the most important detail. Research has shown that giving these kind of putting the word in a category and then the most important detail help children hold on to it. Also using kid-friendly language, which brings me to that. Is it a noun, or do we say it's a person, place, or thing? Do we use the word verb? Do we use the word adjective? I think, again, it's important to think about your specific students, as you all do, and what will be most important for them. Here we tend to start with the type of word it is, or the purpose of the word, and then transition to those more traditional labels: verb, adjective, noun, pronoun, but giving the students what they need. And then visuals are so important. So here we have a picture of a kid so that the students know exactly what a baby goat looks like. The other one would be an action word: to hurl. It's a word that they may not have heard of in the story coming up. Is an action word, which means to throw something. And there's a picture of a boy hurling. This explicit instruction where there's a really clear format, when the children get used to this, they're able to become more independent in using it, not only when they're recalling words, but also when they're learning other new words. And then we just wanted to share a fun way to practice new words. As Jill was saying before, when they can use it in a sentence, that's when you know that they own it. So for this game, you would need a stack of vocabulary cards. I just have a few examples from the book I'm using, Camp Hilltop, all 2-syllable words. And then a cube. We use this stop and go cube that Jill developed. Mine is multi-purpose because it also has vowels on it, but it's for this game, we're just using red and green. Jill has one too. And the kids roll the cube. If they get a green, they take a card. They read the word, and then they need to use it in a sentence. Sometimes the sentence needs to be scaffolded, because if they say, I like the mascot, that doesn't really help us know if the student knows what a mascot is or not. So sometimes a little bit more scaffolding is necessary. They earn a point for the correct response. If wrong, the teacher gets the point. And if they roll a red, by the way, they have to pass to the next player. Sometimes I just give them another question, a teacher choice question for red, so that everybody's still getting ample practice, even though they're not earning points. So that's just an easy way to be working on having the children use the vocabulary in their own oral language.
I will say that this cube has been with me since 1984. That's how many games it's played. It's been something that's super fun. It just adds a little spice to a game. That's, typically turn taking, just adds a little spice. So now it's time for the fourth pillar, which is comprehension. And that book by Nancy Hennessy that's recently come out with a foreword by Louisa Moats really is full of great ideas. And, we're discussing it because of this all important notion that, once children become competent at decoding, it's language comprehension that determines overall reading ability and potential challenges for the reader. But we want to make sure that in order, let's say, yes, we've taught them how to decode. That's all wonderful. We don't want to wait until they're competent decoders to spend a lot of time on comprehension. There is this argument that some people have made, which actually makes really no sense to me, that decodable text is not for comprehension. Well, then that means I think you have the wrong decodable text, because why would we put a book in front of a child that doesn't make sense? The story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. We need to teach them early on to be seeking meaning when they read. So as you start to consider the various decodable text options out there, make sure that you're finding books that have a story arc, so you can ask comprehension questions. That way you haven't established bad patterns where they spend a year learning how to decode without really thinking. We teach them right away, look for the problem in the story, even starting with the cover. So we have this activity, and that was something that was sent to you all, the template called Discover the Cover. And we spend time, and I'm actually just going to grab a book very fast. This one is perfect, actually. So A Pig in His Wig. This is what I've been talking about. So, we look at this this cover and we think, well, now there are 4 or possibly 12 books into the series, depending on where they started. And they've already learned this idea that we look at the cover and we start to think, what could be happening in this story? That's a problem, because we explicitly taught that every story has a problem to be solved. That's what we want them to know early on, so that they're looking for the clues, they're looking for the problem, and they're starting to anticipate then too, well, how can that problem be solved? So, what could be the problem here? Well, the pig looks pretty happy wearing this wig. Like, could that be a problem? Well, come to think of it, pigs don't usually wear wigs. Maybe that's the problem. Let's read the book and find out. So what we do before we even open the book is we actually say, like, what are you seeing? Okay, I see a pig, I see a wig, I see a smile. And we read the title too. Like, there could be clues in the title, not just the picture, of course. And then these are some of the ideas that some students had, like what could be the problem? Well, maybe the pig loses his wig, or maybe the pig's wig is too large, or maybe the pig loves his wig. And then we get to talk about like, well, actually, is that a problem? Well, maybe the pig loves the wig so much that the pig will never take it off. So maybe that's the problem. So we'll read to find out. And then many books, in fact, I think also the Camp Hilltop books, and Abby will talk to you about that, the PAF books have comprehension questions. Just be on the lookout for them. These are on the inside of the cover. So many decodable textbooks now have comprehension questions, which is good. And just be aware of them for teachers who are on the go. And so now comprehension for older children with a different series. Abby.
So this is also another series I've used for some of my reluctant older readers. This is Phonics books. I believe it is out of England, but it's widely used here in the US. We were lucky enough to meet the women behind this. It's really kind of cool because there's not a lot of text, but it looks like a graphic novel. So very different than Camp Hilltop. There are a lot of pictures. The vocabulary is pretty rich and it looks cool. I mean, the characters look really cool. So in this series as well, there are some of those supports, but a lot of questions for discussion. I think that these are great resources for teachers. Many programs have these, as Jill mentioned, comprehension questions, but to be careful not to just limit yourself to these and be on the lookout for ones that really do incorporate vocabulary. I see in this one, chapter 8, what does the word punt mean? And these are great starting points. I think some of the best questions are the ones that come at the beginning as you read. Be on the lookout for, or helping your children to see what to focus on. I know that I have some students in the past who are looking at the smallest detail or remembering the smallest, the most inconsequential part of the storyline. And so really having them look at what's the most important information. But these questions can really guide your discussion, but don't be afraid to jump off and use others as well.
Did that go through?
Yep. It did. So visualizing is something that we talk a lot about as an important skill for students to have when they're reading. And not all children visualize easily. So it's really important to spend some time doing this. This is just a paragraph from that Camp Hilltop, but you can do it really with any decodable text at all. It's funny, Jill, remember we were at that conference and somebody was saying you can't use decodable text. You were just saying this to teach comprehension. We're like, what? Of course you can. And this is a perfect example. Let's teach visualizing using this text. So I've put in a picture box and have the kids visualize, and then we check each other. We make it into an activity. I sometimes will put like a little box, let's keep points for all the details that you've included in your drawing. It doesn't have to be a work of art. It can just be stick figures or a blob for the button, for the rabbit. But let's see how many details we can incorporate, and really getting the kids to think about what they're reading and visualize what they're reading. You can also do this with books. I think the next one, yeah. So I was just showing you from the Phonics books. These do have pictures. So what I did was I would just put a sticky note or a piece of paper right over where the picture is, have the children draw their picture, what they're imagining, and then take it away and they can compare. Excuse me. The kids love these activities, and what you're really doing is developing visualization skills.
You good there, Abby?
I am, sorry, sip of water, yes.
Okay. Have your sip and then we'll keep going. Yes, so that's actually, I love that idea of like if you copy the page, because clearly they'll start looking before and after to get some more clues about what they might be seeing. But, copy the page, put a piece of paper over it, and then remove it and compare. That's so much fun. So, Abby, you're continuing with fluency, our fifth and final pillar.
So fluency has been defined in many different ways, but fluency, and in my class, we have Fluency Friday, and it is, we always say it's almost like Goldilocks story, right? It's not too fast, it's not too slow. It's reasonably accurate reading. So you want to get the words reasonably right. Here's the appropriate rate, not too fast. We're not speed reading. We're also not reading like a robot. We want to pay attention to the punctuation with suitable expression. Again, not reading like a robot. And that has such an impact on understanding. When we're teaching kids about fluency and the importance, I think it's fun to give some really specific and explicit examples. I've used these with some of my middle to upper elementary age students, and they really get a kick out of them. If we go to the next slide, I'll give you 2 examples. So explicitly teaching the importance of punctuation. This sentence desperately needs a comma to save some lives. And then also teaching how important the little words are. Lots of our kids trip up words like in and on and for and from and of, and how those make a big differences, or even a play versus the play, or leaving it out. Those 3 sentences, I'll put those up on the board one at a time, and I'll either have them visualize or describe what they're visualizing, or act out what they're thinking when they read "we're going to play" versus "we're going to a play" versus "we're going to the play." And I think teaching this helps to teach the why behind the skill. And I think the more we can impress upon the students that there's a reason behind all these strategies, the more they're going to buy into it and become more motivated.
Yes, including why are we practicing our fluency? Because one day you may all become famous actors, and and you might be in a play. Well, that's silly, but you know, children do enjoy being in plays, and one great way to practice your fluency skills is in a play. You know, the rereading is important, and this and by creating a play, which Abby did for the level 1 readers, these lines are taken from A Pig in His Wig, and children need to pay attention to the punctuation. They have to pay attention to the expression and the speed. You know, here they don't want to read, "No, pigs cannot have wigs." Like, this is a moment where there's a conflict. No, pigs cannot have wigs. So this is just turning your any decodable text into a play is a fun way to practice fluency. And there's another activity that we've recommended called the STAR technique. And basically it's a 4-step process. Well, where first the student reads and then the teacher provides corrective feedback. We really want to hear our students reading. This idea of a cold read being a choral read means that we can't hear the individual kids and how they're actually, you know, breaking down those words. It's usually one strong kid is leading the group and the others are following behind, even if it's a half second. So they're not really getting practice on their own, you know, with a cold read, which is critical for us to understand how they're applying their phonics skills. So first, the student reads and the teacher provides corrective feedback. That's the S. Then T, the teacher then models fluent reading of the same page or sentence. And then all of the group reads that sentence aloud. And then finally, they reread quietly to themselves. So that's just a way of really looking at that sentence a number of times. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that for every sentence. We suggest, like, if you've got 6 kids in a group, you pass out numbers 1 through 4, and then you give 2 kids stars, like, you know, make it random. And that you just call, like, as in your group, you might say, okay, number 4, your turn. Number 1, your turn. Like, and then star reader, okay, star, and then it's whoever has the star, they get to read. So, and then we do this whole process, all 4 steps. And I'll just share with you that this is a page from a school that's been doing this technique. They sent us their cute little visual of it, so we wanted to share that. And Abby has some other really great ideas for reading, practicing fluency. Whoops, Abby, can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry. I don't know about the rest of you, but my kids love games. And I think for struggling readers, anytime we can make it activity-based is really important, as long as we're mindful that we're practicing the skill. So one game we like to play in my classroom is called Rats. So I would have like a list of sentences from the text. I would cut them up, put them, I have actually like a bucket. I cut them up, put them in here, fold them up, put them in here. And then there's some pieces of paper that say rats, like darn, right? Rats. And the children take turns picking their sentences. They practice them silently. They read them out loud. If you get a rats, it goes back in the bucket. If you get a rats on your third turn, all your sentences go back in the bucket. And you can either play for an allotted amount of time, or you can play for an allotted number of sentences. Whoever gets 3 sentences first without getting a rats is the winner. I like to, whenever I play these games, emphasize the idea about luck versus skill. And I try to emphasize the idea that most of these games have a lot to do with luck.
Okay.
Another important strategy is a silent preview. I've found that once we hunt maybe for the punctuation, if that's what I'm really wanting them to focus on, is that there's a lot of punctuation, exclamation points, and we've taught how to raise your voice or change your voice when there's a question, either a silent preview or for words that they need to apply their decoding strategy. So a silent preview can really give children the exposure, which leads to the confidence when they're asked to read aloud. Rereading, we do things also where once we've read and discussed the comprehension, we just might read for fun to practice that fluency. Read with a monster voice, read it in a whisper. Read it to the nurse, call the nurse and read the paragraph to her, stand on our chairs and read it, just to kind of mix things up, jazz it up a little bit, make it a little bit more fun. Then I have this guy, Officer Fluency. I am not kidding you. Even my 4th graders love when I pull him out. Officer Fluency is on patrol, and he is watching to make sure that you are stopping at the stop sign, the periods. You're pausing at the commas, at the yield signs, the commas. And the kids absolutely love this. Sometimes they're giggling so much they can barely get the sentences out, but that's a really fun one as well.
And our final slide before we get to questions.
Yeah, so one more thing we wanted to mention is that a lot of reading programs, decodable reading programs, do come with supplementary materials, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. This is from the Phonics books, so that one that looks like a graphic novel I was showing you earlier. They have a ton of things in here, from decoding practice to some games, but also here, this is designed as a vocabulary activity, but actually you can use some of these activities can, again, you can hit more than one area. You can turn this into a sequencing activity. You can turn this into a fluency activity. So just kind of being on the lookout for materials that can tackle more than one of the pillars at the same time. I find that that's really, then you're going to get the most bang for your buck, but also you're going to be able to get the most out of the limited time that you sometimes find yourself with these struggling readers.
And we want to say thank you, because
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So super fun to talk to all of you. And we're happy to answer questions or just have a chat about teaching techniques, what we all do. There's people here that we'd love to hear from you and what works in your classroom. So Wendy, thank you for the opportunity to talk with your team there, the people, the NILD group.
Thank you so much. This has been really good. And I am guessing that a lot of our educational therapists who are on here are really encouraged, because so many of the strategies and things that you said help are things that we already see embedded within our within our cognitive therapy, so that touch so many different techniques, and you just gave us more strategies to incorporate within those as well. So we do have one question. It's from Megan. She says, Jill, I love your books. You're amazing, and I'm excited to finally get to hear you speak. So you have a fangirl here. She is like, she's cheering for you guys. Yes.
Well, I always
I love
say
that.
as long as her students are excited about reading and making progress, that's makes me really happy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And there's no other questions popping up here, but one other thing I wanted to bring out that I noticed you guys said multiple times that many of our, when we're in training, we can get frustrated with this answer. Was it a lot of times when somebody asks a question, we'll say, it depends on your student, depends on your student. And so you guys were so great to point that out. All of these are great strategies, but it depends on your student for which one you might choose to use. And with that in mind, I have a question. So a lot of times decodable readers, you've taught us ways to look at books and to find other decodable readers. And you gave us a good strategy. A lot of our students come into us maybe at a little bit older age sometimes. So they're kind of put off by the younger looking readers. I love your readers, Jill, because with the cartoon characters, it helps bridge that gap for many. But what are some specific strategies that you might use for an older reader? And then we have one more question that just came in. So,
okay. So the Phonic book series has a really nice set of books for older kids. So, I mean, when we talk about strategies, I think, I often say that your decodable text really should be the backbone of your reading instruction, because it's the place, if they're struggling readers, they're behind, they still need phonics, right? And I mean, if they're reading on grade level, but they've got language issues, we don't need decodable text. We just need, a different source for addressing their language issues. But if there's still decoding problems at older grades, yes, we want to find those materials for the older kids, and Phonic Books does have them. And another company, and I'm looking to see where my book is, and I cannot find it. It's from Simple Word Books, and that's the website, Simple Word Books, and they have chapter books that are really designed for older kids, and that's another company I would recommend.
I think the High Noon books do too. There are some titles you have to pick through them, and depending on matching up your scope and sequence, but the High Noon books also can be. And I do think these Preventing Academic Failure, I'm showing you one from the middle of their series. My kids love it because they feel like they've read a really long chapter book. And I have a group of fourth graders this year. So they feel like, and they have other titles, other topics. So
thank you. That's helpful. And your resource page has all those good resources that you referred to. But Judy has a question. She says, regarding your star reading technique, do you provide feedback to students' errors as they read, or at the end of the sentence page or the page?
100% as they read. They need immediate feedback. Thank you for that question. I will never, ever discuss the star technique again without saying that. And yes, immediate feedback is critical. A child won't remember it if they don't hear it right away. And oftentimes what I do, if like they get stuck on a sentence and there's a heck of a lot of sounding out, I will like say the sentence is the pig loves his wig. And so they get stuck on his. So they the pig loves, and they have to tap out is his. And now I'm thinking, okay, they lost the beginning of the sentence. So I might say the pig loves, and then have them finish from there, reread his, keep going. And then I might say, okay, nice and smooth. So they read the whole sentence again. Yes, immediate feedback. Thank you for that question.
That's great. So, well, I think we are right here at the end of our time. You guys were lovely. Thank you for all of those strategies, the reinforcement, the resources, and just for being such accessible experts for us to learn from.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're really happy to talk to all of you. So have a good day, everybody, and happy teaching.
And have a great time yourself. See you guys soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.